Hello everyone, I'm your hostess with the mostest, 8-Second Gaming, and in today's video we are going to be talking about Diablo reviews. Because the game has been out for quite a few days now, everyone's been able to play it a little bit, understand the world of Sanctuary, get their hands dirty, and me personally, I've been loving the game. I think the game is a solid 4.5 out of 5. There's tons of fantastic groundwork that Blizzard can go off of to keep adding to the game to make it relevant for the next 10 years to come. But not everyone sees it the same way, and there are plenty of 1-star reviews out there. So today we're going to be diving into them and maybe offer some counterpoints, maybe even agree with some stuff, and then just kind of talk over all of these. And I do actually want to make one thing very clear before we move into these reviews. This is not me bashing anybody in any way, shape, or form. I understand that everyone is going to have different opinions on games. Not everyone is going to like the same game. For example, I am not a fan of Dark Souls games, yet I know a lot of people are. This is just me trying to have a friendly discussion and have some counterpoints on some things that people might not like about the game. But with that covered, let's jump into our first review. And I want to target this review first because it does cover a lot of different points that a lot of people do make. So it checks off a lot of boxes very quickly, and it allows me to move on to a few more niche ones later on. So to start off, let's go through this review point by point. And to start off with, they say there's like 5 dungeon bosses and 100 plus dungeons, so you get to fight the same boss many times. And I have to say, I do agree with this con. It is a very big downside because I don't like to run the same thing over and over, which is kind of weird because when I played Diablo 2, I loved doing bail runs. But right now in Diablo 4, it just doesn't have the same feeling for me. When you go into a different dungeon, you should be fighting a different mob or even a different boss. But I am hoping that Blizzard in the future is going to be adding in more variety of dungeon bosses with the new seasons. Maybe right now these are just placeholders so that they have the game out and people can enjoy it, and as the game expands, they're going to be changing it. That is my hope for the future, but this one is a very viable concern because it is a little annoying. But moving into the second point, they say there's way too much backtracking in every dungeon, and the layout pretty much the same in every one. And this just straight up is not true. There is a little bit of backtracking in some of the dungeons if the objective is to grab something and return it to a pedestal. It's in the name, you have to return it. So you're going to kill a bunch of mobs there, grab the item, and return it to that location. But in other dungeons, like where you have to kill every single mob that's in the dungeon, it's not that bad. There's barely any backtracking unless you make a wrong turn or miss a mob. That's not really on the game, that's kind of on you. And in other dungeons, like my personal favorite one, Anissa's Claim, there is no backtracking at all. It's a rectangle, so as you go around, when you finish it, you're at the door and you're ready to move on to the boss room. So I don't really understand where this point is coming from. If anybody has a counterpoint on this one, leave it in the comments, I'd love to hear. Moving to their third point though, they say combat is slow and feels bad. Now this might just be the build that you personally went with. Me, I went with a rogue. So I have like 3 different dashes plus the built-in evade that every character has. So there's potentially 4 ways for me to be jumping around the fight, so combat feels very fast paced to me. But if you have a very bad build or the gear that you have is not that strong, I get that it probably feels a little bit slower. But that's not really the game's fault, that's more on the person that's making the build. I do understand that some builds are a little bit slower paced, but that is the point of the build. Something like a necromancer with summons is not going to be as fast as a rogue that is just doing a bunch of damage with traps. The summons have to kill the mob first. The rogue, you're actually just gonna go up and beat the crap out of it. So again, I don't really understand this one. I think again, it's just a personal problem and it's not something you can really fault the game for. And his fourth point is that there's only a couple viable builds for each class. This is just a very common thing in ARPGs. The game that I played most for the Diablo series is Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction, and again, there were only a few viable classes in that game as well. If you were to play Assassin, you were more than likely a Trapsin. If you played a Paladin, you either had to be a Smiter or a Hammerdin or you were useless. The only class that really had a lot of viable flexibility was the Sorceress, because you could be either cold, fire, or lightning and still be perfectly fine. And even if you look at other ARPGs like Path of Exile, each different season there are the stronger builds, and there's only a few really viable ones at League start. So this is just a very common thing, and I don't think it's really that big of an issue with Diablo because we are seeing constant buffs and nerfs right now. Now, the next point is that there are cringe cutscenes that don't stop coming. It's a campaign, there's lore, they have to be getting it through somehow. If you don't like the cutscenes, you can just skip them, but it's a campaign. It's a campaign. People want to see the cutscenes. I thought the cutscenes were amazing. I wasn't the biggest fan of how they did some of them with like the turn-based talking, but again, it's a campaign. They have to deliver the lore somehow. If they did it just straight up reading, there was no way in hell that I was going to do that and I was going to skip through everything. So I think that's just a personal opinion that this person has, and it's again not anything that you can fault the game for. But the next point that they have is a very viable thing, and this is that there's a bad inventory system and you cannot search items even in your stash. And yes, this is a huge problem that I and many other people have with the game. This is an issue that happens when they kind of built the game half for PC, half for console. The reason that you have the keyword searches instead of actually being able to type in something specific is because they're building that for console quality of life. If you were to type out something on console, it would take forever, so they do the keyword searches to save them time, but it ends up just kind of screwing over the PC players. They either needed to go all out for console or all out for PC. One is going to suffer, but the other one is going to have all the quality of life things, and it's going to have to be dealt with by the other party. When you do the half and half thing like this, it just kind of gets janky for both sides, and it's just weird. So I do hope that they change this in the future, and I do think that this is a very viable concern. But on to the next one. This is that they have a battle pass and it's just in-game microtransactions for more money. I don't really understand a lot of people's complaints of battle passes. If you don't want to pay for the cosmetics, then don't. But for a game that they are planning to constantly update, I don't think that having small microtransactions in the game is that big of an issue. They do plan to add things into Diablo 4 as the years go on. So if everyone was to only pay the initial cost of the game, they wouldn't have the money to continuously add stuff in. Having a battle pass and microtransactions just makes it so that the people that want to support the game and want to see it grow can do so. But if you don't want to pay for it, don't pay for it. My main game is Apex Legends, and I haven't spent money on that game since season 1, and we are now in season 17 years later. I use the Apex coins that you get from one battle pass to pay for the next, and I have not bought anything else. And that is a game that I have almost 10,000 hours in. So if you don't want to pay for microtransactions, don't. Now the next point that they have is that all your progress will be reset every season, so you have to do everything over again. Now this is just a very common ARPG thing to do with the seasons. If you take a look at Path of Exile, every 3 months a new league comes out, you get reset, you have to do the campaign again, you have to level up new characters, you have to do the Trials of Ascendancy. Diablo 3, the same thing, you had to level up characters. Diablo 2, Lord of Destruction, you had to do ladder characters over again. It's just a way for them to keep the game fresh and to keep the grind just there for players. And if they do something like they did in Diablo 2 where there's non-ladder characters, then it doesn't technically reset your progress because you can just play non-ladder. I don't know what they're going to call it in D4, maybe it's going to be called non-ladder again, I don't know. So broken record here, again, I don't think this is a very viable complaint because it's just a very common thing to do. And the last point that they make is that there is no real endgame. But Diablo 4 actually does have very typical Diablo endgame. The endgame for them is to just get the best gear that your character can get and reach the maximum level. That's their endgame for Diablo. But they are adding in more stuff as time moves on. So right now, you finish the campaign, you move into World Tier 3, you level up in that a little bit, you move into World Tier 4, and you start to grind the best gear you can. You do the Helltide events, you do the world bosses, you do all the fun stuff that you want to do. You make new builds, you level up new characters, you have fun with the game while it's in its base steps. And then when the new season comes out and they add more stuff in, then there's going to be more and more endgame potential. If you take a look at another very popular ARPG, Path of Exile, they have so many league mechanics because the game has been out for a very long time. GGG adds in a new league every 3 months. So there's a ton of stuff that has been added into the game and just has been built upon for their endgame. Diablo 4 has been out for a few days. They have not had the same amount of time to add endgame content in. But I'm hoping with the new seasons, they're going to be adding new dungeons, they're going to be adding more world tiers on to add more difficulty, and they're potentially going to be adding in Uber bosses because I think like an Uber and Dariel fight would be so much fun. But I think that does it for this person's review. They made some very solid points, they made some very solid arguments. Some of them are more opinion based than others, but I'm glad that we were able to cover this. But now let's move into our next review, and this person also has quite a few things to say. They start off by saying, as a diehard fan of the Diablo series, I am so disappointed. I know Blizzard has gone downhill from what it once was, but this is just a pathetic excuse for a Diablo game. And then they start to list the reasons that they hate it. To start off with, they don't like the level scaling. They think it makes the leveling up feel pointless and fine-tuning gear just really hard, and it makes your enemies stronger too. Now, this is actually a very big issue that a lot of players are having. I personally haven't run into it yet, but watching the hardcore race for 100, I definitely did notice it. I'm a very big fan of Zizaran, so when I saw his group really struggling, I knew it was going to be an issue. The way that the leveling scaling works in the game is a little janky, so the mobs just continue to level scale up with you up to like 94, I think it is. But what makes it so that leveling up does hinder you, because as soon as you level up, the mobs get stronger as well, so there's no real benefit for you going higher in levels in the game right now. Yeah, some Paragon points can be extremely helpful, like you're getting 5% damage, that's really cool. But if you're getting 5% damage and the enemies are also getting stronger, then did you really get any scaling off of it? So this is a very big issue that a lot of people have voiced, so I'm really hopeful that Blizzard has heard these concerns and they are going to be fine-tuning it in the future, so this is a very solid point. I like this one. The next point that they make is that it's missing the features that core Diablo experience needs. They don't have any set items and they don't have any rune words. And he also does question where Deckard Cain is, but that guy died in Diablo 3. But to address the issues of the rune words and set items, rune words have not been a thing since D2. They were cool in Diablo and I understand that, but I don't think it's core to the series of the game to have rune words. They were only really around for one game. And as for set items, games that are adding in set items always have a very tough time balancing around them. Set items are either extremely strong or extremely weak, and it's very hard to find a happy medium. So I am kind of glad that set items aren't in Diablo 4, and I do hope that they don't bring them in because they're either going to be way too strong that you're going to have to run them, or they're just going to be non-existent in any build. And the last one of this review that I do want to kind of address is the fourth topic, and he says, why is everything so spread out? Mainly because it's an open world and there are events that happen in the world. If everything was super close together and just right beside each other, then the events that happen in the open world wouldn't be too exciting. The Helltide events are kind of fun because everything is so spread out. You have to be paying attention to what the chests are. You can use different maps and just other third-party programs to tell you exactly where the good chests are, but for the people that like to explore and have that kind of aspect into the game, it is cool to run around and figure out which chests are where on your own. And I do think it changes the feel because it is a little bit more open world. If you take D2 for example, yeah, it was a linear path, but that was also very spread out. You had to do a lot of running and a lot of searching to get from the start of the act to the end of the act, and it's the same thing in Diablo 4. Now let's move into our next review, and this one does address the lag. This review says, want to spend $100 on a game that will crash every 10 seconds? I love how all of their responses to the quality issues with the game is redirecting it at you and saying that there's an issue on your end, when everything but the brand new game runs completely smooth. That should tell you all you need to know. Don't buy it yet, wait for it to go on sale because it's literally unplayable as of right now. And yes, the lag is very frustrating. I'm not going to try and argue any type of form against that. Dying to disconnects is very annoying. Shroud losing his level 100 hardcore character because of a disconnect is very frustrating. Lagging is always going to be something that is a very negative downside in every single game. So I just want to make my stance on this very clear before I move into the next part. I don't like the lag. I think they should find a better way to implement a few things so that the lag is non-existent. I understand that going from location to location there is going to be lag because it is open world, so they load it chunk by chunk, so sometimes it is going to be a little bit laggy. I'm not upset about that. But playing devil's advocate, the reason that there's a lot of lag is because they are constantly hot fixing stuff. Right now they are applying so many patches and so many changes to the game that if they were to take the servers offline every single time they added something new, the game would be down multiple times a day. So we either have to deal with lag while we're getting constant changes, constant nerfs, constant buffs, constant fixes to some things in the game that are either broken or just weird or maybe overpowered, or they're going to do it maybe once or twice a week. And then they have to take these servers down completely and then we can't play during that time. And I don't know about you guys, but I play at very weird times. So if they were to take it down at like 2 AM, then I would lose a lot of my playtime because that is when I'm awake and playing. So I don't really think there is a solid solution in this situation. We either don't get constant nerfs and we have to wait for weeks in order to get them, or we get constant updates and we have to deal with a little bit of lag. But let me know your opinions on all this in the comments down below, and what would you rate Diablo out of 5? I would love to hear some community feedback, and if you guys want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Diablo 4 tips, tricks, and news, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. Once again, I made Second Game, and I'll see you guys in the next one.